Okay, so you want to host Wimbledon. Grass courts trimmed to 8 millimeters, strawberries and cream sold by the thousands, a royal box overlooking center court, and 2 weeks a year when the entire tennis world stops and looks at one address in southwest London. It looks like the easiest business in sports. You already own the most famous tennis tournament on the planet. The tickets sell themselves. The sponsors line up. The cameras show up whether you ask them to or not. Here is what that picture does not show you. A grass court that has to be rebuilt from scratch every single year. A private members club that decides who gets a courtside seat, and it has almost nothing to do with how much money you have. A weather system that can flood a schedule with no warning and no refund policy that fixes it. And a business model so unusual that the organization running it does not even try to maximize profit the way every other major sporting event on Earth does. Before we talk about the money, we need to talk about who actually owns this thing, because it is stranger than almost anyone assumes. Wimbledon is not owned by a media conglomerate or a private equity fund or a government. It is run by the All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club, a private members club founded in 1868, together with the All England Lawn Tennis Championships Limited, which organizes the tournament itself. Membership in that club is not for sale at any price. It is granted by invitation, capped at a few hundred full members at any given time, and the waiting list for even the lower tiers of access has historically run into the years, sometimes decades. You cannot simply be rich enough to walk in. This single fact shapes almost everything about how the tournament is run, because the people making decisions are not answering to shareholders demanding quarterly growth. They are answering to a club culture built around tradition first and revenue second, which sounds quaint until you realize it is also one of the smartest long-term brand strategies in all of sports. Now, the grass. This is where the hidden cost structure starts, and it is more expensive than people assume. Center Court and the 18 other grass courts at the All England Club are re-sown, in whole or in critical part, essentially every single year. The grass itself is 100% perennial ryegrass, chosen specifically because it holds up better under the wear of professional matches than the mixed grass blends used decades ago. Growing tournament-ready grass takes roughly 11 months of preparation for a competition that lasts 2 weeks. A dedicated grounds team monitors soil composition, moisture levels, and grass height daily throughout the year, not just during the championships. Court preparation, seed, soil treatment, irrigation systems, and the specialized mowing equipment used to cut grass to the exact regulation height add up to a maintenance operation that functions more like a year-round agricultural science project than a facilities department. Multiply that across 19 courts, and you begin to understand why grass, historically the cheapest surface to build, has quietly become one of the most labor-intensive and expensive surfaces to maintain at the professional level. Then there is the roof. Center Court and Number 1 Court both have retractable roofs, installed specifically to solve the single biggest operational threat to the tournament, British weather. Before the Center Court roof was completed, rain delays could push matches back days at a time, disrupting broadcast schedules, ticket refunds, and player rest between rounds. The retractable roof system, engineered to close in a matter of minutes, and include a climate control system that manages temperature and humidity underneath it, costs tens of millions of pounds to build and requires ongoing maintenance and testing that runs every single year, regardless of how many days it actually rains during the championships. It is essentially an insurance policy built directly into the architecture, and like any insurance policy, you pay for it in full, whether or not you ever need it that particular season. Security and infrastructure make up another layer that most spectators never think about. Running a 2-week event that draws roughly 500,000 attendees requires temporary structures, hospitality pavilions, broadcast compounds, and a security operation large enough to manage global media attention and heads of state showing up in the royal box. Staffing alone during the championship fortnight runs into the thousands of temporary workers, from ball boys and girls trained for months in advance through a rigorous selection program, to line judges, medical staff, and the small army of people who replace, replant, and repair the grounds overnight between sessions. None of this shows up in a highlight reel. All of it shows up on the balance sheet. So where does the money actually come from? Because unlike most major sporting events, Wimbledon's revenue structure is unusually top-heavy in one specific direction. Broadcast rights, television and streaming rights sold around the world generate the single largest share of tournament revenue. And this is where the numbers get genuinely enormous. Broadcast deals with major networks across dozens of countries, renewed periodically in multi-year contracts, bring in revenue that dwarfs ticket sales entirely. This is consistent with what we have seen in almost every major sporting property on this channel. Live, unskippable audience attention commands a premium that almost nothing else in media can replicate. And Wimbledon, airing during a relatively quiet stretch of the global sports calendar, captures an enormous share of that attention with very little competition for eyeballs during those 2 weeks. Ticket sales come next, and here the economics work differently than almost any other major event you can think of. Demand for Wimbledon tickets vastly exceeds supply every single year, which would normally push an operator to raise prices aggressively or auction off premium access to the highest bidder. Wimbledon does something unusual instead. A significant portion of tickets are distributed through a public ballot system, a lottery that anyone can enter, specifically designed to keep at least some access available to ordinary fans, rather than letting the entire supply flow exclusively to corporate hospitality and resale markets. This costs the organization real money in the form of revenue left on the table compared to a pure market rate auction system, and it is a deliberate choice, not an oversight. The long-term brand value of being seen as accessible, rather than purely a playground for the wealthy, is treated as worth more than the incremental ticket revenue a fully commercial pricing model would generate. Sponsorship and hospitality make up the third major pillar, and this is where Wimbledon's exclusivity actually becomes the product being sold. Corporate hospitality packages inside dedicated pavilions, offering guaranteed premium seating alongside catering and branded experiences, sell at prices far above face value ticket costs, and companies pay them willingly because access itself, not just the match being played, is the scarce resource. Official sponsors and suppliers, from equipment brands to luxury goods companies, pay substantial fees for the right to be associated with the tournament's name and imagery, and the club is notoriously selective about which brands it allows into that circle, protecting the exclusivity that makes the association valuable in the first place. Merchandise, licensing, and the museum and tour operation running out of the grounds year-round add a smaller but steady additional stream. Here is the part that separates Wimbledon from almost every other major sports property in the world, and it is the detail that makes this whole business model genuinely strange in the best possible way. The All England Club does not exist to maximize profit for shareholders, because there are no shareholders in the conventional sense to satisfy. A significant share of the tournament's annual surplus is directed by agreement toward the Lawn Tennis Association, the governing body responsible for developing tennis at every level across the country, funding grassroots programs, coaching development, and facility investment nationwide. This means the tournament's financial success does not simply accumulate as private wealth for a small ownership group. It gets redistributed, at least in significant part, back into the sport itself. That structural choice removes a huge amount of the short-term pressure that pushes other major sporting events toward aggressive commercialization, court signage everywhere, constant price increases, sponsor logos plastered across every surface, because the organization is not trying to squeeze maximum extraction out of every single asset. It is trying to protect a brand built on restraint, and paradoxically, that restraint is precisely what makes the brand worth so much in the first place. Let's build the two scenarios, because even an institution this insulated from ordinary market pressure still faces real financial risk every single year. The good year, clear skies across most of the fortnight, meaning minimal roof usage and no significant schedule disruption. Broadcast ratings hold strong across major markets, with marquee matches landing on the biggest courts at the times. International audiences are actually watching. Hospitality packages sell out completely. Corporate sponsors renew at increased rates, reflecting rising broadcast reach, and the surplus generated comfortably covers the full cost of grounds maintenance, staffing, security, and infrastructure, with a healthy contribution flowing to grassroots tennis development afterward. This is the outcome the organization plans and budgets around every year, and historically, it is the outcome that happens more often than not. The bad year. A wet British summer forces extended roof usage on both covered courts and repeated rain delays on the 17 courts without one, compressing the schedule and forcing matches into unfavorable broadcast windows, or, in the worst case, extra unscheduled days that were never budgeted for. A weakened field with top-ranked players withdrawing through injury before the tournament even begins softens broadcast interest in some markets and reduces the value of certain sponsorship guarantees tied to marquee player participation. Grounds damage from an unusually wet spring requires emergency remediation work on multiple courts, adding unplanned maintenance costs on top of the standard annual resowing budget. None of this threatens the tournament's existence. The institution is simply too well capitalized and too central to the sport for that. But it does compress the surplus available for reinvestment that year, and it illustrates a quieter truth sitting underneath the glamour. Even the single most prestigious and financially secure event in tennis is still, underneath the ivy-covered walls and the century and a half of tradition, an outdoor agricultural operation at the mercy of a British sky that has never once signed a broadcast contract guaranteeing good behavior. So does hosting Wimbledon actually work as a business? The honest answer is that it works because it was never built to be judged purely as one. Every major financial decision the All England Club makes, from capping membership instead of selling it to the highest bidder, to keeping a public ballot alive instead of auctioning every ticket, to funneling surplus back into grassroots tennis rather than maximizing private return, trades away revenue that a purely commercial operator would happily capture. And that is precisely the point. The scarcity is not an accident of high demand. It is manufactured and protected on purpose, the same way a diamond's value depends on supply being deliberately restricted rather than mined without limit. Wimbledon could almost certainly extract more money out of every single ticket, every court, every square meter of hospitality space than it currently does. It chooses not to, year after year. And that restraint is exactly what keeps 500,000 people trying to get in through a lottery instead of a marketplace. Exactly what keeps broadcasters paying a premium for the rights to something that feels, even now, slightly above the ordinary business of sport. The grass gets torn up and replanted every single year. The tradition underneath it does not. And that is the actual asset being protected here. Not the strawberries, not the roof, not even the trophy. The idea that some things in sport are still worth more than what the market alone would pay for them.